The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, greetings from Minneapolis, everybody. Come to you cordless. It's Wednesday night, July 23rd. I looked because I don't usually know what day it is. It's Wednesday night, July 23rd, 2025. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 255, and if you're keeping really close track, last night I said it was episode number 255, and I was wrong because my big fat fingers can't type correctly. Yet another error. Who would have thunk it? Hope you guys are having a nice evening. It was another 90-degree day here today, and not only that, the dew point was 75, which is like Miami. It's like the Amazon. It's like walking through water. Unbelievable. Also, we had rain most of the day, but yesterday it was the same thing. We didn't have rain, and you still didn't want to go outside. And everyone says Minnesota's cold. Yeah, okay, sure. Tonight, our guest, Francis Menton. Francis is a lawyer who about 12 years ago started a blog called the Manhattan Contrarian. He writes out of the West Village in Manhattan, New York City, mostly about economics and energy stuff. We pre-taped this afternoon. He's a fascinating guy. He's got a lot to say. And also, he was outside. So I don't know why that matters, but I think it's, now that I think about it, I think it's the very first time we've ever done an interview with somebody not inside. Yes, he was outside on the front porch in Connecticut, of all places. He was not in New York City. And do you care? No, you don't. But you care about what he has to say. Very, very knowledgeable man. Also, and I mentioned this to him during the interview too, we've had quite a few people on the show now, especially lately, who like write about stuff that actually isn't their professional expertise. Like we had Spencer Morrison on last week, and he's also a lawyer that writes about economics. He's written books. Francis is not. Francis, matter of fact, we talked about that at the end. About he's been their publishers have been goading him to write a book, but he doesn't seem to have the time, and I don't either. I mean, I've thought about it too. Writing is hard. That's the thing. And, and especially there's there's millions of good writers. I mean, I don't have to tell you to stand out in that crowd. Although in part 2 tonight, after the interview, I'm going to tell you a story that our friend David Strom wrote in Hot Air today, which will probably get your blood going. And you probably did not hear on the news too. David's a really good guy. He's been on the show many times. He's a really good writer. And I know, and Jennifer Oliver O'Connell, we have a lot of people on the show, come on the show, are really good writers. I don't know if I don't want to compete with that. I kind of got my thing here, and I might have one or two really unique opinions, probably enough to get a couple books out of, but after that, then what? We're here. I sit and yak and yak and yak, and yet you tune in. Well, you tune in for the guests. I tune in for the guests too, so it's fine. No one wants to listen to me, but you do. So anyway, tonight, Francis Menton. Tomorrow night, Thomas DiLorenzo. He's the president of the Mises Institute. Now, we have our good friend Murray Sabrin. He's been a regular guest on this show for years, and he belongs to the Mises Institute, and Thomas DiLorenzo is the president of the Mises Institute. And what that is, it's an institute of professional economists, mostly of what's called the Viennese School, which was Murray Rothbard and a bunch of other people, and also Francis Hayek. I think you can go back, or Frederick Hayek. You can go back that far. Extremely laissez-faire capitalism, hands-off, free markets. That's what they promote. Thomas DiLorenzo runs that. So he's going to be our guest tomorrow. we run reruns now on Fridays, and this Friday we're going to run Spencer Morrison. I just mentioned him just a second ago. His interview from July 15th, which I think was a week ago Monday, if I'm right. He was a very interesting guy. I like that. I like talking to him very much. So we're rerunning his show on Monday. No, on Friday. Next coming Monday, the 28th. The At Night All Star panel is here. That's Tim Conaway, Don Zorro, and Larry Newman. And we do what old men do. We shoot the shit. That's the technical term. It's the same thing you guys do in the McDonald's in the morning, so we do it on internet TV. We're not going to McDonald's, although I'm a fan of McDonald's. I am. Next Tuesday, Rachel Ehrenfeld, and I mentioned this before, I'm really looking forward to talking to this woman because she's written a book called The Soros Agenda. And God, I think George Soros is my top 5 people to interview, even though he would consider it hostile. And it would not be a hostile interview. I don't understand where he's coming from, and I don't know if anybody does. Here's a guy who got filthy, filthy rich. He escaped the Nazis, came to the United States with his parents, joined, got on the stock market and became filthy rich trading stocks. And now it appears he wants to tear the whole system down. And like, what is the motivation of somebody? Why does somebody think that way? This is a system that made you filthy wealthy from nothing, and now you want to obliterate it. I think that's a sick mind, but I really honestly I don't know, and that's the thing. I would interview him without any. Those would not be rhetorical questions. I actually want to know where he's coming from because I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me, and he's obviously not stupid. Although I have to tell you, my personal accountant thinks he cheated. He's written 3 books on his investing methods, and people say they shouldn't work. So I don't, most of the people who read these books to say it's bullshit. So I don't know. My accountant actually thinks that he's been involved in crime. But if he hasn't even come close to getting caught. That's for damn sure. That's Tuesday, next Wednesday, a week from tonight. Economist Gary Gallus is going to be here. He's a professor of economics at Pepperdine University in Los Angeles. He too is a member of the Mises Institute. Do you see a pattern here? And also on next Thursday, July 31st, it's our 2-year anniversary. And I hate to do this, but this is just the way it turned out. We're going to have 2 Mises economists in a row. Murray Sabrin is going to be on next Thursday, 31st, because he was our very first guest on show number 1, July 31st, 2023. And so we got a couple other people coming, but I can't announce that yet. I haven't confirmed it. So yeah, and then I have to tell you, August is almost entirely booked. God bless Kimberly. Thank you, Kimberly. And I'm going to talk about that later too. Okay, so Stephen Colbert got canned, and everyone says, "Oh my God, it's a travesty. It's freedom of speech." Well, there's 200 people that work on that show, and they were losing $40 million a year. All right, now I'm not making $40 million. I'm not even making $1 million. I'm not even making $1,500. I got one person working on this show, and we do 90 minutes every night. Okay, it's different. I understand. There's no band. There's none of that stuff. But still, you shouldn't need 200 people to put that show on. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in part 2. We got other stuff too. I want to thank Nils Gravelis last night, private investigator from Los Angeles. We had a fascinating conversation. Honest to God, one of the most interesting guys I've ever met. If you get a chance, go back and watch that show from last night. What am I talking about? Last night, because this guy is really, really cool, and I had an enormous amount to say. And I got him tied into something. And we were talking about the Epstein case, and a judge made a ruling today that kind of plays into what Nils is talking about. And we're going to talk about that in part 2 too. But before we do that, here's Francis Menton. He's coming on, folks. Take care. Joining us from somewhere in the woods in Salisbury, Connecticut, it's Francis Menton, the author of the Manhattan Contrarian. Hi, Francis. Nice to see you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for joining us too. We appreciate it. You know, I'm fascinated by your blog, and a lot of people quote it. And here's one of the reasons I actually asked you to come on, and that is in the about section, your description of living in Manhattan. And I'm gonna read this part of this here.
Okay.
Quote, the central tenet of that orthodoxy is that all personal problems of the people in society can be solved by government taxing and spending. The obvious corollary is that since all problems can be solved by taxing and spending, therefore they must be solved by taxing and spending. And anybody who stands in the way of those solutions is immoral. And I thought, well, that's pretty much the best description of liberal government I've ever heard.
Yes. Well, I don't know if I am the originator of that or the complete originator, but basically, isn't that it? Is there more to it than that? And I've actually confronted some of my liberal colleagues with that and say, is there anything more to it than this? You think you see the money over here, the poverty or the whatever other problem over here, and you say just take the money and solve the problem? But is there anything more to it than that?
Yeah, and the real problem right now is, and I want to talk to you about this too. Are we just so awash in money in America that it's like people are spending hundreds of millions of dollars for causes, and that not only do the problems never get solved, the people that are supposed to benefit from the money never really do. You know?
Yes, we are way too awash in money. Uh, I mean, too awash in money. Are you suggesting you can be too rich, or maybe as a country? But we definitely are rich enough to give lots of people the illusion that there are no limits, and I I think it's the road to perdition to try to follow that prescription. But I think lots and lots of people have the idea that there are no limits. The government can take plenty of money to solve all the problems, and it's just a lack of political will that prevents them from doing it.
Yeah. So, what do you think of this Mamdani guy?
The question is it ignorance or stupidity?
Yeah, that is the question. I deal with that all the time. That's my primary question on the show.
Is it ignorance or stupidity? And I don't think he's really that stupid, so it has to be ignorance, but it's willful failure to learn.
Well, okay, there's this too. He's 33 years old. He's never had a real bona fide job, and so we are raising these people right now, the young people who have never really worked in any. Well, most of them haven't even worked in a Burger King, let alone something substantial, And so they don't. It's like they think money's magic.
Or they've had a laptop job, and laptop jobs can be. They're, in a sense, they're real work. They take some focus and concentration for at least a few hours a day.
Yeah.
But they're completely detached from anything that has to do with providing for your actual needs, like food or clothing or shelter. They're multiple levels away from that. And the electricity comes from a wall socket, as far as they know. It must be generated in the wall somewhere.
We got a lot to talk about here, Francis, because you do a lot of writing about energy and climate change, and that's one of the big themes on the show. Because I one of the two things I'm trying to get across to the country is that, in my own small way, is that human-caused climate change, I think, is the biggest grift ever put upon the American public ever.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
It is. It's unbelievable that people actually buy this stuff. And so, you mentioned this about, you've written several blog posts about electricity coming out of the wall, and the fact that, well, first of all, isn't I can buy the solar thing. I can, because it's a fairly, done under the right conditions, it's a fairly efficient way to generate power. I
Yeah.
don't buy the wind
Yeah.
thing at all.
What are you planning to do at 9 o'clock at night?
Well, yeah. Okay, so you got a point. Now, matter of fact, this is really interesting. So I have several friends, especially here in the Midwest, who live in the outskirts. I have a friend who's a giant solar array on his property, and
Mhm.
he's actually selling electricity to the grid. I mean, he's producing an
Oh
excess.
no, and many states have programs where you can do that.
Yeah,
And then these people think because I sold 100 kilowatt hours to the grid at noon, therefore it's just a completely fair and free exchange when I get 100 kilowatt hours back at midnight, not realizing that
it's
for
a
everybody to try to do it, it doesn't work.
right.
And I ask people a lot of times, I ask seemingly smart people, I point to a light bulb and I say, well, there's a light, it's on. When was that electricity generated? And they really have no idea. They'll say, I don't know, a week ago, yesterday, or what. They have no idea that
15 seconds ago.
15 seconds. No, it's not 15 seconds. It's less than a nanosecond.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I was being generous.
It's right this very fraction of a second. It's generated as long ago as the speed of light from you to the power plant.
Yeah.
So some teensy fraction of 1 second ago is when it was generated.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you want electricity at midnight, you have to have something that generates it at midnight.
Right. Now, my sister-in-law lives in North Carolina. She's so far, and she has a very large house. I mean, they built it themselves. She lives in a cul-de-sac of basically 7 very wealthy people, but they're really in the boondocks, seriously. So she and her husband, they got off the grid altogether. They're not even pumping electricity into the grid. They just got out. And so they built a giant solar array, but like, to your credit, they also bought a massive battery that cost them a shitload of money.
They're not there yet. They're off the grid. Solar and a battery are not going to do it. You need to have a generator too. Yeah, and solar and a battery will never do it. Did they tell you they do it with solar and a battery?
Yes, they did, but I might be
mistaken. They're saying they don't have a generator?
They didn't mention it either way, so I don't really know.
You ask them. They have a generator, and I'll tell you why. You cannot buy a battery big enough or capable enough. Why is that? Because, there you go. Because solar is seasonal. So on June 21st, you get 15 hours of sunlight and 9 hours of dark. Okay. So you can, with a big enough battery and enough solar panels, you can fill the battery for that night. Okay, how about on December 21 when it's overcast and you get on an overcast December 21, you get approximately 3% of the energy that you get on June 21. Now, are you going to buy a 30 times bigger battery, which is or try to get a battery that's going to store the power from June 21 to December 21? It actually doesn't exist. And if you think it does, try putting your cell phone on the shelf for 6 months and see if it still works without being recharged. It doesn't. So the battery to make a solar system, to turn it into a year-round affair, does not exist. And particularly because of the seasonality of solar power and the problem of sun drought. So you can get in the wintertime a fully overcast week when you only have 9 hours of sunlight to begin with. And you need to have a month's worth of power in storage to get through that, or to get through the whole winter.
I don't.
Nobody can do it. Nobody can afford it. They have to have a generator if they're off the grid.
And I do know they spent an enormous amount of money on this battery. So and whether they have a generator, I mean, I honestly didn't ask them and they didn't mention it. But yeah, it was a very, very large expense. So just for that, so I want to get back to this thing about your a little description of living in Manhattan here.
Oh yes.
All right, this I find this kind of I've always wondered about this, and I mean I'm not the only person who's noticed this, so that's kind of the point here. That the more densely populated areas become, the more liberal people tend to be. I mean, I don't know if you know. Even the Romans noticed this 2,000 years ago. Do you have do you have any idea why? I mean, so Manhattan is the most densely populated part of the United States. Do you have any idea why this happens?
Well, there may well be an association or correlation with density, but I'm not really sure that it's density per se. I mean, I think it's what we were talking about just shortly ago, that people in the countryside are either closer to or personally engaged in the making of stuff and the things you need for life, like food, or even factories, uh, or construction. So they've got they can see it going on, and a lot of them are actually engaged themselves in it, as opposed to in New York City, where people go to offices and they actually make a lot more money than those poor suckers who are in the manufacturing plants and
Yeah.
construction and things like that, agriculture, who do backbreaking labor to bring us our food and our physical products. Um, so we have the laptop people who think that all this stuff is produced by magic. So again, you get the idea that production of actual things we need to live is kind of the least important thing in life. Money is free, and you can pass it around.
You wrote a blog post about, and I don't think this was Manhattan. I think this was New York City in total, about the fact that in the last 60 years or something like that, forgive me, I'm pulling this out of my head,
Yeah.
that manufacturing in New York City went from about 1 million people involved in it, went from about 1 million people to 60,000. Do I got that right?
Yes, and that blog post is not recent. You must have gone back and looked for it, but it's from maybe 2015 or so,
I do my research.
or 14. But it might have been when Trump was first running for president, and a lot of the narrative and his narrative had to do with the devastation of the rural or of middle America, that all the manufacturing had moved out, leaving small towns with nothing. And that post that I wrote was called "The Devastation of the New York Economy," I believe. And it pointed out that if you think that some town in Ohio that lost its automobile parts making factory, but maybe it was the only factory in that town, was devastated, you ought to look at New York City, because New York City had 30,000 manufacturing companies employing 1 million people in the 50s. And today, I don't know the number of companies, but the number of people working in manufacturing is about 60,000 in New York City. And 60,000 is more than zero, but almost none of them are in Manhattan. We're talking about
there's 8 million people in New York City. I mean,
8 million people, and there's 3.5 million or more jobs, and almost all of them are the large majority are white collar. There's a lot of logistics.
uh-huh.
There's a lot of warehouse. There's a lot of bringing the stuff to the people jobs, and there's a lot of maintenance of existing buildings jobs. But the large majority of the jobs are white collar. What drives our economy is what goes on in those office buildings, and the people who sit in front of computer screens all day. That's what it is.
But New York City is, other than Manhattan, once you get out of Manhattan, there's plenty of space to build factories. I mean, I still remember, Francis, I was about 18, 19 years old. I had to take a bus from Manhattan to the Newark airport in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I was astonished driving through northern New Jersey what I saw. I mean, especially at that time. I don't know if you can remember.
Well, even if you did it today, that particular stretch from Manhattan to Newark Airport is mostly industrial,
Right. Right.
and that's still true today.
Yeah.
That's still true today. Um, I'm sure what they make in those places has changed a lot, and maybe the number of jobs has declined in industrial. You know, a lot of it is warehouse and distribution, which is part of the process of bringing the physical goods to New York City, as opposed to actually making them. Right? They're bringing them to New York City.
Uh-huh.
I mean, here's something I like to look at facts and statistics. There is a railroad line that comes across the southern United States, Southern Pacific Railroad, probably part of the Union Pacific today, but it comes from Los Angeles to New Orleans, and then there are lines from New Orleans up to the northeastern cities. But that line from Los Angeles to New Orleans has multiple hundred multiple mile plus long freight trains per hour coming across the United States, bringing the goods that come from Asia into Los Angeles and then east across the country. It's a gigantic, I mean, far more goods come that way than through the Panama Canal.
Uh-huh.
Because the Panama Canal is small and capacity limited.
Yeah.
That's so goods come there, and that vast amounts of such stuff ends up in the New Jersey distribution complex there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that we have those trains coming all over here. I mean, I'm in Minneapolis, all over here too. You know, all over the Midwest. We see them. They still exist. And the amazing thing is, that's kind of like, you know, trains are really old school, but it's cheap.
Well, the trains you see in Minneapolis, I would suspect, are the ones that originate out of Seattle and come across the northern tier and then down into the Chicago area.
Right. That's right. That's what they are. That's what they are. Okay. I got to collect my thoughts here because I had something.
We have lots of stuff.
Oh, we got lots of stuff. That's right. We do. Oh, this was what it was. Speaking of all this, the manufacturing in New York City. So, and this is, and by extension, we talk a lot on the show about AI, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I haven't seen anything you've written about it, so I'm curious. We get to that in a second. But in some ways, the march to AI is kind of the same way as the march to the laptop people. In the case that seem to have left a lot of Americans behind. But on the other hand, people need stuff to do. I'm very, you know, this like NAFTA, the thing that Clinton espoused, which at the time I thought was a good idea. Now I don't. You know, I've learned. You know, well, what do you think? Do you think NAFTA was a good idea?
Well, in general, yes. I never studied the details of what the agreements were in there, but when I say in general, I mean the idea of as free as possible of trade between and among the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Yes, I think that's a good idea. If we could actually get that in place, we could get Mexico to be as rich a country as we are and end the immigration problem. But unfortunately, Mexico elects stupid leftists who keep them poor. So maybe we'll never get there.
And also, you can make an argument that the cartels have a complete stranglehold on the government of the country too. I don't know how true that is, but apparently,
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't either.
My thing about NAFTA is that I'm starting to think that the trade's unequal, so therefore it left a lot of Americans out of work. Ultimately, that's the way I'm. All right, you tell me I'm wrong.
I don't buy that.
Okay.
So by the trade's unequal, are you referring to what's called the so-called trade deficit, which is what Trump harps on?
Yeah, I guess I am. Right. Yeah.
Well, so a trade deficit is there's a tautology, an inherently true proposition that a trade deficit is the mirror image of an investment surplus. So if we have a trade deficit with some country, be it China or Mexico or whatever, then we have an investment surplus with them, which means they're investing more in us than we are in them. And investment is more inclusive than what you might think of as investment. It doesn't mean just building a factory. It could also mean buying a U.S. government bond. It could also mean holding dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge amount of holding dollars that goes on in the third world, maybe even the second world. And why do they hold dollars? Because dollars are the currency of international trade, so they need them for trade. And dollars, you might think the Fed is incompetent, but all the other central banks are more incompetent. So,
well, hold it, stop. That's actually been my thought for a long time. I have economists who come on the show. I have a lot of economists because I'm really, my premise is that most people in America don't know anything about money. Which we live in the most capitalist country in the world. It wasn't even the reason I wanted to have you on. But the thing about the Fed is that, so I have people coming on here saying we should abolish the Fed, but I'm thinking, well, somebody has to do that, and if it's not the Fed, it's going to be some other version of the Fed, and you can't turn what the Fed does over to Congress. You can't, because it'll become politicized, even more of a mess than it is now. So basically, even though the Fed is highly inefficient and maybe sometimes incompetent, I don't have a problem with it. That's my personal feeling, because I think anything that replaced it would be worse.
well, the United States we had some early version of a central bank called the Bank of the United States, which was organized by Alexander Hamilton, had a 20-year term. It was extended for 20 years, and then we got Andrew Jackson, and he abolished it. And we went from then until you might know the year better than me, 1913 or 14, when the Fed was created. So we went approximately 80 years with no central bank, and it was the time of the fastest economic growth in the history of the country. Now, there were a bunch of problems, but particularly in the way of problems, there were periodic financial panics throughout the 19th century, which were extremely severe. However, they were short-lived, and the economy turned around, but they were extremely severe financial panics. Of course, we still have financial panics now with the Fed. But now
they aren't as bad, though, are they?
Well,
I mean,
the recent ones, like it's 2008, 2009, was pretty bad. Was it as bad as the ones in the 19th century? In terms of the percentage downturn of economic activity, no. However, if there were no Fed and we had today's panic with an economy as big and as diversified as we do, would it still be as bad? It's impossible to make the comparison. I do know that among serious movement libertarians, there is a huge, a big following for the proposition of getting rid of the Fed. And I think their proposition is not replace it with something else. Their proposition is you don't need a central bank. Look at the United States in the 19th century. It did not have a central bank. And it was a time of tremendous economic growth in the United States, albeit with periodic, very severe financial panics. But was that caused by the lack of a central bank? I don't know that. I don't think I have people who push me to get on board with the abolish the Fed movement, and I don't think it's my cause, because I don't think it has its support is in the deeply serious libertarian movement, which is a 1% cause around the United States. It's not going to get political traction in my lifetime, nor can I promise that the world without a Fed would be better than the world with a Fed.
Wow.
I don't like the Fed. I think they're incompetent. I also think they're less incompetent than all the other central banks. So I guess I'll take them.
Well, you have a point here, though, because you got to choose your battles, man. There's only so much time,
You
and
got to choose your battles.
yeah, there's only so much passion. You
That
know,
that is not my particular battle. So
right? Not
so
mine either. Yeah,
so I chose the climate hoax battle as being a battle that I thought I could make a contribution to, and not only that, that I thought would be won within my lifetime, and it's
yes,
going to be won within my lifetime
right.
because it is a hoax, and the proposed solution to the non-existent climate crisis, otherwise known as wind and solar, doesn't work, is never going to work, is too expensive, and will be abandoned with 100% certainty. And everybody who continues down it is just defying physics and logic. So this is a battle that's going to be won. I
Well,
could be on the right side of it. So
doesn't it bother you? Everyone's yelling about follow the science, and they're not following the science. That's that's the thing.
That's pretty incredible, isn't it? But yes. On the other hand, as soon as you hear the term "the science," you know there's something wrong, because there isn't a science, and this is something that I've also written about. As far as I know, science is not a body of accepted knowledge, but it is a method,
Right.
and it is a method of invalidating or falsifying falsifiable hypotheses. Well, that's what I say, and I think that if you read enough about this, you could come to agree with me. But it's almost impossible to find a place where you can see it written down systematically. So almost everybody believes that the science, with the little quotes, is a body of accepted knowledge, which is the opposite of what it is. And
Right.
and there's no I have tried to fight that battle to some degree on my blog.
Do you think that we're winning the climate hoax battle? Do you think right now?
100%. It can't be lost. It can't be lost. And the reason it can't be lost is that wind and solar don't work. So we're getting back to what I was saying about your sister-in-law,
Yeah.
who lives in North Carolina, who thinks she can make solar work.
Yeah.
But wind and solar don't work, and they don't work for making a 24/7, 100% reliable grid.
Well, Francis, what bothers me is that the climate people, if you don't mind my using that term, they don't. There's not even any pragmatism. Like, I don't understand why natural gas is 95% cleaner than burning coal or petroleum. It's almost completely clean, not quite, but almost.
I don't know where you got that number from.
Oh, well, I don't
90, know. All these things are more complicated than what you start out with.
Yeah, but
natural gas, compared to coal has impurities. So when you burn coal, coal is mostly carbon, some hydrogen, and a lot of impurities. It's got a lot of nitrogen in there. It's got a lot of sulfur in there. It's got a lot of other stuff. And so when you burn coal, you get carbon dioxide, you get water, and you get a lot of other stuff, which turns up as ash and smog, right, and so forth.
Right.
And then you can work on your coal power plant to put in scrubbers and schmubbers and all kinds of different stuff to minimize. You can never get 100%, but you can minimize the ash and the smog, and you can get it way down to small levels, but never to zero. But you can't get rid of the fact that you're creating carbon dioxide and water, because that's the whole point.
Yes, but carbon dioxide isn't even bad. I mean,
it isn't bad.
I think.
But now the difference, you said 95% cleaner. So natural gas has very few impurities in it. So when you burn it, you get almost none of the ash and the smog.
Right, that's correct.
But you get carbon dioxide and water, same as with coal. The difference is that natural gas is a different molecule. It's mostly methane, so CH4, 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens, whereas coal is more like 2 or 3 carbons per hydrogen per 4 hydrogens. So you get when you burn carbon dioxide, when you burn natural gas, you get more water and less carbon dioxide, and when you burn coal, you get more carbon dioxide and less water. But I refuse to recognize that as being dirtier or cleaner.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you said natural gas is 95% cleaner, I don't recognize carbon dioxide as being dirty. So,
I don't either. No, I wasn't even talking about the carbon dioxide. I was literally talking about the ash,
so
literally.
you're talking about the impurities.
Yeah.
And you could be right, although they've done a huge amount of work to minimize the amount of ash that escapes into the atmosphere. Again, it's minimized. You can't get it to zero ever.
My point though, Francis, is that all right, if you're going to buy, like, all right, we could argue about whether that's actually true, but why wouldn't you use natural gas? I mean, that's the part I don't get.
Instead of coal?
Yeah, instead of coal. Why not? We got a shitload of it.
Oh, I can give you multiple reasons.
All right.
There's multiple good reasons. One is you don't want to be reliant on one thing because you could have supply interruptions.
That's true.
Okay?
Very true.
You're much better off having in your system having some natural gas and some coal. So if one of them suddenly has a big problem, you have the other.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Another thing, and this goes to supply interruptions, also security. Natural gas, almost not at all, stored at the plant. It comes in a pipeline. It's comes just in time and is immediately burned. Coal, you store at the plant. So a coal power plant might have a 30-day
supply
on hand.
Yeah.
So if the supply of coal gets somehow interrupted, you got 30 days to fix that. When the natural gas supply gets interrupted, you got an outage for that period of time. So, and if natural gas, like a pipeline, can rupture, and it can take a couple of weeks to put it back together. And during that time, the plant is out. So yes, there are very good reasons to have both coal and natural gas in the system.
Oh, I wasn't going about to an either or scenario. I was just about the fact that the climate change people don't want to use natural gas. It seems that's the thing that I was.
Well, because their jihad is against fossil fuels in general. It's against carbon dioxide, and some of the climate realists try to sell natural gas as the replacement for coal on the ground that it emits far less carbon dioxide per unit of energy generated, which it does. Maybe it's half, or I think it's more than half, but it's not much more than half. So you've eliminated half your emissions, but you're not on the way to zero if you're replacing coal with natural gas. And the only thing they'll accept is zero. So natural gas is a non-starter.
Yeah, but that's a stupid thing about the whole thing. Like you said, you're never ever going to get to zero. It's like,
well, I was saying you'll never get to zero of pollution emissions from a coal plant, but will you ever get to zero in terms of use of fossil fuels? I can't think of why anybody would want to do it, but you could do it with nuclear. Of course, they won't accept that either.
Right. That's the other question. Why won't they accept that? Especially now, we've basically figured out all the problems with it after the last 50 years,
Well, the answer to that is on the about page of my blog, which is it has a list of the fundamental principles of the liberal orthodoxy, and one of them is that use of energy is a basic and fundamental human right, but all actual known forms of producing energy are unacceptable.
That's right. That's right. I saw that. That's correct. Yeah. So that's
a fundamental principle of liberal orthodoxy.
Yeah. And maybe an oxymoron or something, or a contradiction or something like that, Oh, and then you were talking about also stranded assets, and this is bullshit too.
Bullshit. Bullshit, but I've read 100, maybe 1,000 articles saying every asset for production of fossil fuels is going to be stranded.
Yeah. Do you want to explain to the viewers what that is?
Sure. So what they mean by stranded is obsolete, and therefore it won't be usable anymore, and you'll have to write off your investment. And so you will have built a natural gas power plant over here, and now it's obsolete because their theory was wind and solar power are going to be so much cheaper that nobody can use natural gas anymore. That is actually false. But another theory is the government will prohibit you from having a natural gas power plant, and therefore your investment will become worthless and you'll have to write it off. So that's what they've been saying. But and for a while it looked like there might be something to it because the governments around the world, particularly in advanced countries, were sequentially upping their restrictions on fossil fuel infrastructure. So maybe that was going to be true, but now in the last year or two, that's completely turning around, and everybody's going back to fossil fuel infrastructure because it's what works, and it's what works at an affordable price. Meanwhile, how about wind turbines and solar panels? Now that we've built enough of them, we realize they don't work. Now, I was writing they're not going to work before because it's not complicated to figure out why they won't. But it's complicated enough that people who don't like arithmetic are never going to sit through a 10-minute demonstration.
Right, but if you're talking about climate change, you should like the arithmetic.
I'm into arithmetic.
Like you said, though, it's a really complex subject. It's extremely complicated.
Well, the whole subject of climate change is complicated.
Yes, that's right.
And you might say that the question of why wind and solar don't work and can't work, there's some complication to it, but it's basically a matter of arithmetic. It goes beyond what you can really do in your head. It doesn't go beyond what you can do with a pencil and paper, but it would take you a while. So you want to really have a spreadsheet to figure it out. But it's all addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. So it's nothing you didn't learn by the time you were in 6th grade.
Right.
And the fundamental problem with wind and solar is it's not just intermittency. It's not that they go up and down, but they go up and down unpredictably. So how do you provide for the worst case? That's the problem with wind and solar and for making an electrical grid that works. How do you provide for the worst case? How do you provide for a 2-week-long wind drought?
Right.
When there's just no wind for 2 weeks, how do you provide for that? How do you store up enough electricity to run New York City for 2 weeks when you're relying on wind power to do it and the wind is not blowing?
Well, let me, I'll just float this by you. My personal feeling is that solar can make a contribution, but wind power is completely, utterly ridiculous. First of all, it's very inefficient. It's mechanically generated. You need people to maintain those giant turbines. They're ugly. They kill millions of birds. And like you said, if the wind's not blowing, you don't have any electricity. Now that's true of the solar panels too, if the sun isn't shining, but at least the solar panels are kind of dormant. The thing about the wind turbines is that they're still ugly as hell, even if they're not turning. And and it's just a stupid way to make electricity.
It is. I guess I'm not particularly into this, but if I were to make an argument for wind as opposed to sun, the wind turbines, the latest versions of wind turbines, can get up to an annual capacity factor of over 30 and maybe even 40. Solar panels, in most places, you get an annual capacity factor of 20. Now, California does better. Why? Because it's a desert and it's sunny. But they can't get to 30. They're more like 25 or 27%. You go to a place, and these you live in Minnesota. Minnesota's building solar panels. They get an annual capacity factor on the solar panels of like 15%.
Yeah, I know.
And England is even lower. I mean, England is the cloudiest place in the world. So they get almost no sun, and they build solar panels, and they get like an 11% annual capacity factor. It's ludicrous.
Well, I just read this recently, just a few days ago, about the fact that the Netherlands, they've been trying to go to net zero, and they're literally rationing electricity now. They can't, because I never thought about that, but it's cloudy as hell there too.
The Netherlands, all Northern Europe. Germany is an extremely cloudy country, and they're also building solar panels everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, hey, this is totally hypothetical and completely kind of maybe off the subject.
Mhm.
I was at a dinner party this weekend talking to a scientist, and my question to him was, and I'll run this to you too. Do you think by 2050, do you think we'll have commercial nuclear fusion? Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, first of all, I'm certainly not knowledgeable about the in a technical way about the limitations of the technology, and what the problems are that have kept it from working so far. Well, I can tell you that in my whole life, since the 70s, at least since I started looking into this, people have been saying nuclear fusion, commercial nuclear fusion, is 20 years away.
Right, that's right.
And 50 years have gone by, it's still 20 years away.
That's right. That's exactly what my scientist friend said. He said no, because we've been talking about it for 50 years. It still hasn't happened.
Can they make it happen someday? Maybe. I don't know. It is remarkable that the sun and all the other stars kind of just do it naturally, and yet we can't make it happen. But it requires reaching temperatures of like in the millions of degrees.
Yes, it's really terrible. That's right.
And that is a gigantic problem, let alone when you're talking about getting temperatures in the millions of degrees, you have safety issues. I mean, all they're talking about so far is trying to get some tiny little demonstration thing working.
Right.
Well, okay, you want to now generate enough power to run the United States?
That's right.
And you're going to have hundreds of these things with million-degree temperatures going on in them. It seems to me there's some safety issues that haven't been really studied very hard yet.
Francis, I don't know if you know this. It's only been a year since they finally ran a nuclear fusion test that generated more power than it took up to start. That only happened a year ago.
And probably did it last as long as 100th of a second?
Well, I think it lasted 15 seconds, but still, that was a big deal because the first time ever. They were working on it for 50 years. They finally did it, so that was considered a line to cross. So,
well,
yeah, but that doesn't mean
I haven't looked into it carefully. I know that there have been multiple claims of people that we have started a cold fusion reaction that doesn't require these tremendous temperatures, and it's actually over here and it's operating. And then it took like a year for people to figure out that it wasn't real.
Yeah, well, that's Francis. That's a whole 1 hour discussion. I knew a physicist working in a major university, and I talked to him about that. And this is when this happened, the Fleischmann and Pons thing. And he told me, well, that's really interesting. He said, they say it doesn't work, but he said, I've looked at this data, something's going on there. And I've heard this from other people too, that actually that they may have stumbled on something. Maybe it specifically didn't work, but that there was something going on that. And my friend said he was working on it personally. He was researching it. So
okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Anybody wants to. I think my basic proposition is I don't think the taxpayer money should go into it.
Yeah.
You want to make fusion? God bless you. If you can make it work, you can become a billionaire. God bless you. I wish you all the best. If you make money on it, you're entitled to keep it, as far as I'm concerned, and buy your biggest yacht anybody ever saw. But don't ask the taxpayers for the money. That's my fundamental proposition.
Yeah, I'm going to change the subject here.
Okay, new subject.
You wrote a really good blog post that really fascinated me, and the title was "The Fate of the U.S. If the Left Got Control of the Supreme Court."
Oh, well, that now we're talking about something I know a lot about.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, and I have to ask you this too. You're a lawyer by training, and your blog is mostly, not entirely, but the large majority of it is about economics. What was the fascination?
Well, economics and energy. So no, I don't know. I'm a lawyer by training. I mean, I was a lawyer by profession.
I
went to law school, obviously, and then I had a profession in the law. In college, my major was economics and math, actually, economics and math. So I have a background in that, and I've always been interested in that. But in addition to that, the whole climate and energy thing is just a hobby that I studied up on. But the law and the Supreme Court and how the litigation process works, that was actually my profession. So I actually know more about that than any of these other things.
But do you know something? I've had several people on the show like you who like write books and stuff about what isn't necessarily their professional training. And I find this interesting because I think in a lot of times people like you can look at a problem with an overview that people who are actually in the trenches don't get. And that's why I think it's really important that people like you keep doing what you're doing.
Well, or they don't get it, or another problem with the trenches is groupthink. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
So and not just, I mean, groupthink can be just a social phenomenon. It also can be enforced, and out in our academic world, there's enormous amounts of enforced groupthink, starting with the government funds it, and then there are committees and bodies that allocate the funding, and they adopt an orthodoxy, and nobody can get funded unless they go along with the orthodoxy. And so this is particularly true in the climate area, that the skeptical community, the people like myself saying this whole climate change thing is bullshit and the proposed solutions won't work, all those people are amateurs on their own money.
Yeah.
So,
hey, Francis, I got to tell you a story. I've told it on the
Yeah.
show several times, but it's pertinent to what you're talking about. So, and this is one of the reasons that started to change get my mind thinking about this. This is about 12 years ago or so, around 20, I don't actually remember the date, around 2014, I'm at a Christmas party for a very large scientific organization. I can't tell you the name of the organization. I can't tell you why I was there. But anyway, yeah, there's a bunch of really prominent scientists, like 100 of them in a room. And we're basically like drinking and having dinner and having a good time, right? So I'm at the bar with this guy. He's in his field, he's a very well-known climatologist at a major university. He's not famous to the public, but he's famous to people in his field. And we're sitting there drinking, and I said to him, "Professor, tell me about climate change." And he slams his drink down in the bar and looks at me and he says, "Yeah, I'll tell you about climate change. Climate change is complete, utter bullshit." And then he went into a 20-minute monologue about, and unfortunately, I'm kind of tipsy and he is too. So he's talking and I'm listening, but I can't remember a lot. But the one thing I do remember him talking about, he said that we recognize human-caused climate change only to get money to fund our projects. He said everyone in the field who's legitimate doesn't buy this, but politically we have to do it.
They're about to all get defunded, and it couldn't happen to it. So he was admitted to being corrupt. So why can't you tell me his name?
No, I can't. I can't tell you his name, and I can't tell you the name of the organization either. I can't. Sorry. It's just the reason I was there.
Because one of the things, I don't know under what circumstances you were there, but one of the things that I feel free to do, I have a blog. I don't have advertising. I don't have revenue. I don't have contributors. I don't have subscribers, and I feel completely free to name names about anybody. And if you don't like it, too bad. So yes, don't tell me that you don't tell me, because if you do, I'm naming his name.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I can't tell you who was or why I was there. I can't. So under the specific circumstances. So, but yeah, getting back to this blog post you wrote about the Supreme Court, really fascinated me about what you wrote wasn't so much what you wrote about the American Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, but courts in other parts of the world.
Courts in other parts of the world. But I'm just reading today, and if I knew you were going to ask me this, I would have paid more attention to it. But I think I just read today that something called the ECJ, European Court of Justice, is that it? Has issued today, I believe, an advisory opinion on climate change, declaring that there is a duty of governments to do something about climate change. And I haven't read the opinion more than that, but well, our Supreme Court does not issue advisory opinions. I think my post that you might be citing there talked about the Israeli Supreme Court, which may be the craziest Supreme Court in the world, although the German and Dutch are kind of up there.
Well, I didn't know this, but first of all, I did know the fact that there's no real written hardcore Israeli constitution. I didn't know that. But what I didn't know is that you said that the Supreme Court of Israel is basically appointed by the local judicial association, right?
Well, it's more complicated than that, and I'm not sure I know all the details, but it's essentially a self-perpetuating institution of which the elected government officials, including the prime minister and the Knesset, have limited input. And I think when a new Supreme Court justice needs to be named in Israel, there's a commission of some kind that does it. And it has some substantial, like 9 or 15 or something like that, members. And maybe it takes 2/3 of them to appoint somebody to be a Supreme Court justice. But some of them are appointed by the Supreme Court itself. And some of them are appointed by the Knesset, I think, and maybe 1 or 2 by the prime minister. And I'm not sure who all else. The Bar Association, the Israel Bar Association, which is a left-wing group. Right. So these different things have input into who gets on the Supreme Court, and the voters can't change it. It's controlled by the left, and the voters can't vote it out. Oh, the Knesset passed a law to reform how the Supreme Court justices are appointed, and to give the elected prime minister the right to do it. Now, I don't know exactly what the provisions of that law were, but it happened a couple of years ago, and the Supreme Court struck it down.
Oh, yeah, I bet they did.
By the way, on what ground? On the ground that it was unreasonable. That's their ground. Unreasonable.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. The thing that, I got to ask you about this. You being a lawyer, and you wrote about this, because this really, really threw me, about the fact that this district judge somewhere put a temporary restraining order on the big, beautiful bill act that Congress passed about the Planned Parenthood defunding. And like you mentioned, I don't understand, or I understand how some judge somewhere, there's 680.
Did I write about that? I think that only occurred like a day or 2 ago. I don't think
No. You wrote about this. You did. You wrote about this. And I understand how some federal judge somewhere can stop the president's executive order. But like you pointed out in your post, this is a law passed by Congress. And basically, this judge is basically trying to upend it. And I don't understand how you get away.
No. I don't want to get you too excited about this.
Okay.
Plenty of laws passed by Congress have been struck down by the Supreme Court.
All right.
Plenty of laws passed by Congress, typically on grounds of violation of equal protection of the laws or of due process.
Okay.
So that certainly does occur and has occurred. Now I'm trying to think of an example, and nothing is coming to my head. But there's
I believe you.
There's 50 such examples, but well, first of all, when a court is striking down an executive order of the president, it doesn't need to rely on the Constitution. It can say the executive order is contrary to statute. So if there's a statute that's contrary to the executive order, a court can use that as a ground. So it doesn't. And there aren't a lot of grounds in the Constitution for striking down a statute passed by Congress. The main ones that have been used are in the 14th Amendment and the 5th Amendment, the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause. So and so that does occur. I think the one that I wrote about was a funding.
Yes.
So how do you strike down a funding thing? Now, I don't think I wrote about this one, but I read about it this morning, that a judge in Massachusetts who has become a favored judge for them to try to get a case before, her name is not coming to me immediately, but I think this just occurred a day or two ago, invalidated the elimination of funding for Planned Parenthood that is in the big beautiful bill. And previously, the federal government, for many years, it was called the Hyde Amendment. I think it goes back to the 90s or earlier. The federal government said no federal money to fund abortions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, Planned Parenthood, which is substantially in the abortion business, I don't know if it's as much as half their revenue, but it could be close or more, said, okay, we got the answer to that. We will divide ourselves in half. So we'll have Planned Parenthood abortion branch and Planned Parenthood other branch. We're operating right here in the same building, but we have two different corporate entities. We have a parent company and one affiliate that doesn't do abortions, the other one does. And the one that doesn't do abortions gets the federal funding, even though they both report to the same parent company. So in the one big beautiful bill, the Congress said, we will not give any funding to any entity that provides abortion or any affiliates of an entity that provide abortion. So that was in the one big beautiful bill. And so that threatens these Planned Parenthood
gravy train
siloed non-abortion providing pieces that get quite a lot of money from the federal government. So they're threatening to take that away. So immediately they're in court before this judge in Massachusetts who struck it down. The ground, which I do not think is going to survive, the ground on which she struck it down is the First Amendment. She said they have a First Amendment right to associate with people, and that is violated. I won't try to explain it to you anymore because I'm not a
lawyer, but that seems like quite a stretch to me.
It seems like quite a stretch to me, yes. So I don't believe that's going to survive, but it might survive the First Circuit and have to go to the Supreme Court. And on top of that, of course, it's done by injunction again. So if you do these things by preliminary injunctions are appealable, and that's why the Supreme Court is getting all these emergency appeals of preliminary injunctions. So this one may get to the Supreme Court very quickly, like a lot of these other things.
Are our courts overburdened, Francis?
Well, anything that's free it has more demand for it, right? It's not priced to clear the market. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
It's not priced to clear the market. So there's a lot of kooky stuff in the courts. All these lawsuits challenging what the administration is doing now are a tiny percentage of what the courts do. So,
do they burn up an inordinate amount of time, though?
Well, at the moment, they're burning up an inordinate amount of time at the Supreme Court. I would say yes. In the other courts, I mean, I've read that there have been, well, I'm sure that there are hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits challenging Trump, but the number of injunctions that have struck things down and then have resulted in emergency appeals is probably less than 100, right? Mm-hmm. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of cases in a year. So the federal court system has about 700 district judges and 100 plus 130 maybe Court of Appeals judges. And they have dockets of
do you think it would approve? Do you think it would improve our civil court system when we took on the British method, where the loser pays? Or if you bring a lawsuit and you lose, you pay. Do you think that would be helpful? Or
I have not studied that carefully. Um, I'm not sure it would make that huge a difference. I think the biggest difference in civil litigation between the American and the European is that they don't have uh, civil juries, particularly in injury cases.
Uh-huh.
So, so how much do you get in damages? Well, you can in France, you can take a case to a you can sue if you lost an arm. You can take a case to the court, but rarely will people actually go through a trial on that because they don't have juries to determine how much is your injury worth, how much is the loss of an arm worth, or the day that you might have spent in agony after your injury.
Uh-huh.
How much is that worth? And what we have in the United States is a talented lawyer can make an impassioned plea to a jury, and sometimes they'll award $100 million, right? In the European countries, they'll have they have like a list or a set of norms, and an arm is worth $100,000, and that's what you're going to get. And it doesn't matter. You can go to trial; you're still going to get the $100,000 because they have a list of guidelines, and that's what you're going to get. And so that is the huge difference between um, our civil litigation system and theirs. The funny thing is, in England really pioneered more than us the business of litigation funders, where some investment fund will back a litigation and pay a law firm to do it in return for getting a percentage of the recovery when the thing is over. And England,
Roughly akin to our class action lawsuits, kind of.
no. Our class action lawsuit, what drives that is when you settle the case or win it, the class action lawyers get paid out of the settlement amount or out of the winning. But no, this funders means they get paid up front. The lawyers get paid up front. And if there's a big contingency victory, so you win $100 million and you get $30 million, the funders are going to get most of that huge bonus rather than the lawyers, because the lawyers have already been paid.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, maybe they'll get a bonus, but not a $30 million bonus. But the funders are going to get that bonus, and so this has driven litigation in England. I think it's not really permitted in other places. It's caught on now in the United States. It's caught on since I retired mostly, so I am not following how that business is developing in the United States, but I understand it has caught on here.
Have you thought of taking any of the posts on your blog and bundling them together into a book? Have you thought of that?
I have thought of it. Yes, I've thought of it. I've also thought about writing books.
Yeah.
And I have a limited amount of time in my life, and the more I think about it, and the years pass and I haven't done it, and it's quite a big project to do a book. Now I could just bundle my posts. Yeah.
Hold on. You dropped out there for just a second. You were saying you could bundle your posts.
I could just bundle my posts. And I actually had a number of years ago, a book agent approached me and said, I really like your stuff. You ought to write a book. I'll be your agent. And I said, great. But then I never really made any progress on writing the book. So nothing happened with that. But I did discuss the business with him. And he said, in general, you're not going to do well with your first book if it's just a compilation of your posts. I don't know if he's right or wrong about that, but that's what he said. He said, you ought to write a first book, and then after that, you can think about compiling your posts. So I could do that. I've also written some series of posts, like part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 20. And my kid said, you ought to compile these into a book, but some of those, they were written over the course of 5 or 10 years. And the trouble is, some of the information or data in those 10-year-old posts is not current anymore. So you can't just compile them and put it together. It's quite a big project to edit it into something which is accurate and current today. And I haven't devoted the time to that yet. I could.
I still think it probably wouldn't be as hard as writing a book from scratch, though, would it?
Probably not. Yeah, probably not.
Well, easy for me to say. I think you should do
that. Have you ever written a book?
No.
By the way,
I thought about it.
you were saying before, people from outside of field who go into writings. I have two different partners, two of my ex-partners, now both retired. I went into blogging in my retirement, and they have gone into writing history books. So I have two partners who are writing history books. Both of them have been pretty successful. One of them is up to like his 5th book or something like that, and has done very well. His name is John Aller. And the other just published his first book. It's out, and they're asking him for more, so he's writing a second book.
I might hit you up for those names afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're good guys. They're both good guys.
I'm going to let you go. You know,
this has been fun.
It's been a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I like this. And this is, you're talking about writing blog posts. This is my version of it. I do this. I have a relatively unusual talent. So, it's like, I don't know. This is what I do.
Well, and you get good viewership for your.
Yeah, it's starting. It's starting, right. I mean, I think this is my 256th show, if I'm right. So
wow. Well, I'm pushing 2,000 blog posts.
Yeah. So you've been at it way longer than I have.
Yeah, so. I started it in 2012.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite a haul, man. Well over 10 years.
And I have never slacked off. So I typically publish 2 or 3 a week and 10 or 12 a month. And that's been pretty consistent for now over 12 years without any vacations or weekends off or anything like that. It's not all that demanding, Well, it is demanding, but it's like a 30 or 40% of time job for me.
Right.
In my retirement. So it's fun.
Don't stop. We'll put a link to your blog in our
great.
Our
Get
blog.
me some more readers.
Yeah, I'll do my best, man. I will. I hope you come back. I'd love to have you on again.
So let me know when you want me, and I'll try to be available.
Thanks, Francis. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
We'll see you. That's Francis Menton talking to us from Connecticut, but actually he lives in Manhattan. And his blog is called ManhattanContrarian.com. We'll put a link to that in our show blog. You want to check that out. Fascinating guy. My God, we're blessed with some interesting people here. I don't know, is it me? But, I have a sickness, and that is I'm just obsessively curious about everything, which helps to do this, which is one of the reasons I do it. But my God, we've talked to some really, really, 255 shows. We've talked to some really, really interesting people, and I'm not going to name them, of course, but I can name the duds that have been the people that were really bad interviews. I think I can count them on one hand out of 255. I mean, that's really pretty incredible. Now, it's granted, it's mostly authors. The thing is, when you deal with people who have books published, you have to be pretty legitimate and have some real talent, because your book is vetted by the publishers and all that sort of stuff. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be good at talking either. But the thing is, most of these people are really, really, at least they know their subject extremely well, let alone other stuff. Now, last night we had a guy named Nils Grevelius. He's a private detective, private investigator out of Los Angeles, Pasadena, California specifically. And I'm going to jump ahead here because I didn't want I have, this is part 2 of our show. We call it the Jim Cast, because I'm going to talk to you now about news that I have found that you probably haven't seen, and I think that I think is either important, weird, or whatever. And so today, oh, Jesus Christ, I gotta find this. Florida judge says her hands are tied and she can't unseal the Epstein documents. Now, this is from, and Niels talked about this last night. So you may or may not remember that Jeffrey Epstein was actually convicted, I think it's in 2003, of sex trafficking in the state of Florida. And they were going to like give him the death penalty until supposedly, amazingly, somebody stepped in from somewhere and told the attorney general of the state of California to basically F off. And and Jeffrey Epstein got a slap on the wrist. I can't remember what it was. Was it 3 months of jail or something like that? Or was it probation? But anyway, it was basically a non-sentence. I think he did see a little bit of jail time, but not much. And the attorney general of the state of Florida at that time, and I can't remember the guy's name, he said he couldn't tell the public why this happened. He said his lips were sealed. He couldn't talk about it. Now today, just today, a judge in Florida, the federal government, the Department of Justice has petitioned the state of Florida to release the files from that case, and the judge says she can't do it. And she said her hands are tied. So now, Grevelius last night, I've had people on the show I specifically mentioned, and I almost feel bad doing it. But the thing is, Walton did say this. I mean, publicly on the air here, so I'm repeating it. I mean, I have heard, like a lot of you have, that there's a possibility that Jeffrey Epstein was working for the CIA. Walton said, and we talked to Walton, I think, a couple weeks ago. He said that his network, and this guy, God knows this guy's connected. I mean, he was on the transition team for Trump. He's been a CEO of major companies. This guy knows a lot of people. He says his network is telling him that Jeffrey Epstein was actually working for Mossad, that is the CIA of Israel. Grevelius said something that I heard before, but it bears repeating, and it bared reminding to me because I kind of forgot about it. And he said, "Well, how about this for a scenario? So you got Jose, I can never, no one knows how to pronounce her first name, Josiane Maxwell, who is supposedly his assistant, who's now in jail for this, and of course Epstein killed himself, and we'll talk about that in a second too. He said, what if the prevailing knowledge is that Maxwell was working for Epstein? What if it was the other way around? What if Epstein was actually working for Maxwell? Now, the interesting thing about that, and I did some looking, we talked about it last night on the show in the interview, but I actually went back and looked this up. Robert Maxwell was Josiane Maxwell's father, and he died in 1991 when he supposedly fell off a boat, believe it or not, while his own yacht, while he was urinating in the ocean. Seriously, this is the theory. There's no evidence that he was murdered, and there's no evidence that he committed suicide. He was naked at the time, and apparently that was a thing for him. He slept naked, and in the middle of the night he would just go to the edge of the boat to urinate and go back to sleep. And they think he fell off the boat and drowned. Well, actually, the coroner said it appears he had a heart attack and fell into the ocean and drowned. That's what happened. He was 68 years old. It turned out afterwards he ran the Maxwell Publishing empire, which he started, that it was massively in debt. Basically, he had no money whatsoever. He was personally, and his businesses were hundreds of millions of pounds in debt. He was based in Britain, and he was a very, very shady character. His Wikipedia entry just describes him as a fraudster, quote unquote. So it runs in Josiane Maxwell's family that they were involved in nefarious crap. And so like Grevelius brought up, what if she was the one working for Mossad, and basically Maxwell or Epstein was her cover? And that would make a lot of sense. So there's no record, and then the thing is, you talk about this too. People say, well, they want the client list. If you're a criminal, you don't you don't keep a list of your clients. You're not going to keep that floating around, in your desk drawer. I mean, shit, you aren't. You know, I mean, if anything, you keep it in your head. And the thing is, if you're a trained operative of Mossad, you're probably trained to keep stuff like that in your head. So then the thing is, okay. People say, well, Epstein was a Mossad agent. Well, maybe Maxwell was a Mossad agent. Maybe. It's this really, really convoluted and a weird story. But it also bears repeating too. And I mentioned this before, and I ran this. I was talking about a friend of mine at lunch. Believe it or not, I have friends. I know it's amazing. I go out. About the fact that nobody really knows where Epstein got his money. And my friend pointed out, well, he did have. I mean, he had known. He was a known officer of fairly large hedge funds, and apparently started one of his own. That's true, and that is true. But there's no record of him ever trading stocks anywhere, even personally. So, which is, for a guy who runs hedge funds, is really, really weird. You know. So then, it's like almost. There's the question: was he set up to do this? I mean, did Mossad or the CIA or both actually set Epstein up in this lifestyle so that basically he could bribe uh, world-class politicians? You do wonder, and especially the way this went down in 2003 in Florida. I mean, the AG in Florida at that time, he was very explicit about the fact that he could not disclose why they changed his sentencing. He said, I can't talk about it. Well, who got to him? Anyway, the interview with Grevalis is really, really fascinating. And I truly suggest you go back and watch it from last night. That would be the 22nd, Tuesday. So, what else happened today? Well, here's something you probably didn't hear either. Now, I'd heard of this, and you've probably heard of it, maybe heard of it too. It's called the Ice Block app for your phone, that you can actually put an app on your phone that shows you where ICE agents are congregating at any time in your city, wherever you are. It uses Google Maps and then overlays this information. So if you want to escape ICE or dox ICE or commit violence to ICE, if you're like a member of Antifa, it's very helpful. It's very helpful if you want to do all that stuff. Turns out the guy who invented this app, who designed it, his name is Joshua Aaron, and he's married to Carolyn Feinstein. And Carolyn Feinstein, believe it or not, worked for the Department of Justice of the United States. Yeah, she did. So you got a woman who's married to the guy who's basically trying to who's designed an app that, if not to hurt ICE agents, at least to avoid them, right? To avoid legal arrest or whatever. And she got fired today for that reason. Now, she claims this is political retribution. But there's another thing, as Strom, our friend David Strom, pointed out, who wrote this article. She's also a member of, she owns stock in this company, aside from her husband. I mean, not in their marriage. She actually owns stock in this company. So you're talking about somebody who owns stock in a company that's designed to thwart ICE agents, and she works for the Department of Justice. Wow. That's thrilling. And like Strom said, can you get people that are more entitled? I mean, she thought this was a grave travesty of justice that she got fired. It's like, and I've seen a picture of these people. They're not that old. I would say they're maybe in their mid to late 30s. And they're having the time of their life. Because she's getting, it is amazing how people who work for the government seem to think that they are due a lifetime job. This really amazes me. This is from a guy. I mean, I've lost track of the number of times I've been fired. And if you work in the media or entertainment business at all, it just goes with the territory. Now, I'll be honest, I've probably been fired more than most people. I probably have. But still, anybody in my business knows, if you haven't been fired, something's wrong. And I'm not pleased with this. I'm not happy or proud to tell you this. I think I've been fired over a dozen times. I've lost count. I have. Every once in a while, I remember, oh yeah, that job. Yeah, I got fired from that, and for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, sometimes I screwed up. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I was framed by people who wanted me out. You know, I'm that's happened many times for whatever reasons. You know, so anyway, yeah. So this woman thinks she thinks it's been a travesty of justice that she owns stock in this company that her husband founded to actually thwart ICE, and she works for the government. God Almighty, I just don't believe it. It's like, does it ever end? And like Strom said in his piece, this is a perfect example of fascism, and he's right. These people, they go around, they call conservatives, we're fascists, we're fascists, we're fascists, and then they do crap like this. You know, I just find this unbelievable. And I'm not saying that the conservatives are not completely free of guilt either, but still, I will go on the record saying this, that when it comes to violence, and I think this has been proved in the last 10 years, the left is constantly talking about how the right is fomenting violence, but in reality, the vast majority of the violence has been from the left. I don't think at this point, I don't think you could even disprove that. I don't. There's so much there. Yeah, there's been a few examples of violence from the right, but it's ubiquitous on the left. I just find it just unbelievable. I haven't commented on Stephen Colbert getting fired at the Late Show. Uh, all right, the guy's making $15 to $20 million a year. Let's say it's 15. Okay, the Late Show costs $100 million a year to produce. Now you think about this. Now that means that's about quick math in my head, $400,000 an episode, roughly. Okay, it was losing $40 million a year, and all that. Okay, and the thing is, when people are saying, "Oh, this is his freedom of speech has been stifled," all this rot, it's all crap. It's a business, matter of fact, I could, and others have said, I could look at this from the other point of view, and that is CBS basically funded his left wing bashing and ideology for 10 years. This in the last 4 years, this show has lost at least $150 million, at least, probably more. But here's the real amazing thing, and this is the thing that fascinates me, and I just find this incredible. They have 200 people on staff there, 200 to put out the show, 200. And I guess that's true of both the Kimmel Show and the Tonight Show too. They have 200 million people on staff. Meanwhile, when Carson did it up to 1992, I don't know about Leno, but when Carson did it, they had 100 people on staff, and the ratings, they had about 3 or 4 times, depending on when you want to measure it, more people watching. Now the thing is, it's not really a good comparison because literally before pre 1992, or at least pre 1982, there was literally only 4 channels on television in America, so, or 5 if you want to count. I had, in my small town, I had 5 channels of television. We were close to a big city, but and it was like CBS, NBC, ABC, one independent station, and PBS. And that's, of course, gets to PBS2, which has been defunded. Now, PBS is probably not going to go away. They're bitching and moaning about losing this money, but by their own admission, it doesn't make up that big a part of its budget. And then the left wing NGOs will come out in force to make certain this keeps going. So I don't think, I'm afraid, I don't even, they're, the woman was Kathleen Marr, who runs it. Her complaint is, well, we'll survive, but what about all those rural radio stations? No, they're going to survive too. I will be surprised if more than a half a dozen radio stations go out of business in the United States, no matter where they are. I will be very surprised by that. I don't think that's going to happen. But getting back to Colbert, 200 people working on the show, 200. So, it's been, if you do the math, I mean, it's been speculated, not even speculation. If Colbert cut his salary to $1, they would still be losing oodles of money, you know. But the thing is, couldn't you get rid of half of those people? I don't understand why it takes that many people. And I'm somebody who, all right, I know this is not really a TV show. I guess it kind of, I don't know. People say, well, this is a podcast, but here's the deal. First of all, we've been doing it live since it started. And when we started, live podcasting was not that big a deal. It had not really started yet. In the 2 years since we've been doing this, now it's become quite popular, let alone video podcasting. I mean, when we started this, the vast majority of podcasting was audio only. That was only 2 years ago. And I did audio only podcasts and radio shows for Kong News for years before this. We could have done video, but the thing is, I still remember we had too many people on staff who was appearing on the podcast who didn't want their, frankly, didn't want their identities exposed. And that's the reason we didn't do it. So I don't know if you call this a TV show or not. Yeah, if it is, it's a pretty bad one. Yeah, I understand. But yeah, I have exactly one person helping me. Exactly. This show has a staff of 2. So, and we're doing 90 minutes 4 nights a week, man. So okay, you can extrapolate that. Okay, right. 57 people are watching this and 2 million people watch that. But do you really need 200 people? I mean, literally, my staff is literally 1% of theirs. And, I didn't even talk about Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan supposedly has 11 million people who watches every show. 11 million. He's dwarfing everybody. He's dwarfing everything in broadcast television. And that's the reason broadcast television is going to collapse. Well, actually, it never will. I'm waiting for somebody. If I was younger, I'd actually do this, but I don't have the time. I don't have the energy anymore to do this sort of thing. Linear television is a perfect way to preview and promote video podcasts. So at some point, somebody's going to start a channel where they're just running, video podcast shows. Now, that's harder than you would think because you have to arrange. You can't just put a podcast on cable TV. You just can't do that because at that point you're violating. Even though the podcast is on YouTube, you're still violating the rights of the people who are producing it. So you have to get permission from every podcast you do to do that, which would be so it's not as simple as you might think. But still, someone's going to do that. And that will be a great. So linear TV is never going to go away ever. That's the way I look at this. But still, the idea of doing like shows for linear TV or like these dramas, like, here's a good example. Like Blue Bloods, for example, one of these drama, or NCIS, one of these shows. Right now, it costs about $3 million an episode to produce those shows. And so you usually use typically 22 of them a year. And then Netflix is involved in this too, but that's kind of a different thing. So we won't talk about that. We're going to talk about linear TV right now. And okay, so you got, $3 million an episode. Meanwhile, you go to like Jesse Waters' show on Fox News, which is drawing almost the same amount of people as NCIS is on whatever night that's on. I mean, there's more than one of them. I know that. I'm just trying to do this quickly here. Other than Jesse's salary, which I'm guessing is about $10 million a year, but also he appears on another hit television show, The Five. He actually does 2 shows, so it's kind of hard to figure out how that you'd break that out. But anyway, other than his salary, I'm guessing that that you can pay his entire staff with $3 million for the whole year, and it takes one, and that's only the cost of one episode of NCIS. And for that, you're funding Jesse's television show, Above the Line, anyway, what's called, for the entire year. And you're drawing pretty much the same number of people. And of course, because of that, the advertising rates are going to be roughly the same. So, I mean, you look at that, the economics of doing this, which is now, I mean, I don't think I have to tell you this. If you actually watch network TV, other than 1 or 2 hardline mainstream dramas like NCIS or Chicago Fire. All three networks have them. There's two or three of them. Other than these shows, it's all pretty much like game shows and American Ninja Warrior, whatever the hell they're doing. It's all that stuff because those shows are really, or The Bachelor, they're really cheap to produce. And yeah, that's the reason. It's hard to justify that sort of money anymore for a drama when, and the reason not that many people watch is because there's so many stuff to watch, which gets back to what I was talking about my youth. There were 5 channels. Now I don't even know you can break it down into channels anymore. For the first time ever 2 months ago, more people are watching YouTube on actual television sets than on their phones or their computers. So you got that, it's like, and then you got Roku. It's unbelievable. I mean, the number of choices you have, and this, stuff like what we're doing here. And like I was saying, Joe Rogan's got 11 million people watching every show. It's very difficult to spend that much money, $3 million on a single 1 hour when Rogan's doing it. I think Rogan has a staff of like 6 or 7 people, if I'm right. I mean, he's making a fortune and rightly so. I do want to point out though, people talking about Rogan, especially Adam Carolla, who are basically the pioneers of this, that they did these shows for a good 10 years before they saw a dollar of money. And they were doing well, Rogan wasn't, but Carolla's done his show 5 days a week for like 10, 12 years now, and for the first 10 years, he did not see a dime and he was paying out of pocket. Now, that's one thing. Both these guys were relatively successful, like I don't mean to insult them, but like B-level comedians. They were making money. So they had the money to plow back into this. But there's no guarantee there was ever going to make any money. And when this started, like in the 2012 and stuff like that, podcasting was a novelty. So, any rate, I just wanted to talk about Colbert there. I mean, people who think this has been he's been silenced because Trump doesn't like him, that's nuts. Now it'll be really, he has a 10-month reprieve here. He's not going off the air for another 10 months, but I'm going to make a prediction here. I don't know when the Skydance merger with Paramount's going to go through. But I predict that if it goes through before those 10 months are off, they will cut him off immediately. That's my guess. That's the prediction I'm making right now. I don't know when that'll happen. There's a possibility it might not happen until May of next year. Right now, this thing looks on track. I mean, it looks like the stuff that, especially the CBS suit brought by Trump, they settled it, and they were thinking that could be a major deal, and it could have. And somebody brought this up though. You look at what's going on now with this thing about Obama and the Russiagate thing, and people say, well, Trump's out for retribution. He's mad. Yeah, but wouldn't you be mad? These people fucked with him relentlessly. I mean, this guy, he ran for president. He won. Okay, maybe it's amazing that he won. It certainly didn't hurt him that he ran against one of the most unpopular candidates in American history, both times, but especially the first time. So yeah, and so then he won, and in 2016, that later in November, he's telling the press, the Obama administration has been spying on my campaign. I didn't believe it because I thought, well, why would Obama do that? He's leaving office. He has better things to do, and that's still fascinates me about this whole thing. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, the DOJ, is now saying that Obama actually drove it. And I don't understand why he did. Well, I don't understand why he bothered. I understand why Hillary would, and I especially understand before the election why they do this shit, because all is fair in love and war, that I understand. And actually, I know it's terrible. It's really, really disruptive, and really it's disgusting. But you do whatever you have to do to win, and if that means cheating, you cheat, and it's terrible. But the rationale is there anyway. But afterwards, I do not understand. I don't understand. I know if Obama came to the conclusion that Trump was going to destroy his legacy somehow, I don't know. And so I find that kind of mysterious, and I don't think we're ever going to find out the answer to that. What drove him to do this stuff? Because really, seriously, he was going to leave office in like 8, 9 weeks. You know, so I don't know. It's fascinating. All right, finally, I'm going to end, and I'm going to show you this. I got this thing here. I got a picture. See this thing on the screen here? All right, they've been finding these things all over Europe, and apparently they're from Roman times. This one was found, I think they're digging up a parking lot or something like that in England or something. It was found in England, but they found hundreds of these things, and it's about the size. You can't tell, excuse me, and you can't tell from the photo, but it's about the size of a grapefruit. They don't know what they are. They don't know what they do. They don't know what, and like somebody's pointed out, they're relatively elaborate, and they're what called dodecahedrons. They're 12-sided things, and each side has a hole of a different size. But they found more than one, as I've said, and they all seem to be more or less the same. I mean, obviously there was no mass production in Roman times, so but these things they are all basically the same structure, and no one knows what they are. No one knows what they were used for. I mean, there have been um, uh, theories that literally they're candle holders. Nobody knows, but they're I can't say they're being found all over the place. I think in the last like 20 or 30 years, they've recovered 200 of them. One archaeologist pointed out that it seems like they're all been found in relatively good shape. In other words, they don't seem to have a practical use as a tool or anything like that. But anyway, there's something else you can think about before you go to sleep tonight, huh? Like, what is that? I have no idea. I want to thank you folks for watching. I want to thank Francis Mellon for joining us. Tomorrow night, Thomas DiLorenzo, he's the president of the Mises Institute, the Austrian Economists Institute. And I was doing some research here because I do research to talk to these people. He's written quite a few really fascinating books, and they aren't all on economics. Matter of fact, a couple of them on Lincoln. And he goes against what seems to be I'm really curious to talk to him about this. He does not think Lincoln was a particularly heroic guy. He does not have good things to say about Lincoln, so I'm going to be interested, and which of course goes against the school bar yard narrative we all learned always. That Lincoln freed the slaves and saved the Union, and apparently DiLorenzo doesn't think so, and so I'm curious to talk to him about that. That's tomorrow night, and then Friday we're running the rerun of Spencer Morrison's show from I think a week ago Monday, I think it was. Well, so anyway, thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate it very much. Good night, Uncle Donnie. Good night to you, wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow night, everybody. Take care.